With COVID-19 dominating the news and our lives, it's kind of easy to forget that we actually have a big-time election coming up just about 6 months from now. President, Governor, U.S. Senate, U.S. House, Council of State, and all members of the North Carolina General Assembly. So what about the campaigns? How do you campaign during a crisis? Rick Henderson is editor-in-chief of Carolina Journal. He's been following some of these races and joins us now. Rick, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Donna.
Anybody campaigning during this, or are they just really blotted out of the news cycle?
Well, they can't campaign in a traditional manner because they can't go to picnics, they can't go to events and forums and things like that.
Or shake hands.
Or kiss babies.
Right.
They can't do any of that stuff. But they are doing a lot of online communication. In fact, a day does not go by that I don't get at least 3 or 4 solicitations from someone because I got on their mailing list to see what their campaign was up to, and apparently their campaign is up to shaking people down. That's what they're doing online right now. But it really has changed things, and we had a recent story in CarolinaJournal.com which talked about how things change. Some candidates are choosing not to do a lot of fundraising right now because they don't really think it's appropriate with the economy in such a free fall to try to ask people for money. Others are completely shameless about it, and they're asking all the time. So it just a part of it depends on
now more than ever. I need you.
That's right. How that perspective plays out. This is a sort of campaign that's going to be difficult, I think, for challengers to break through. Incumbents have huge advantages because anytime they wish to gain an audience, they can simply say, I'm going to talk about something, and media outlets will flock to follow them. And so it's a difficult time for people who are on the outside to try to break through. There's hope, of course, that you're going to see something approaching a more traditional campaign by Labor Day. But again, that still remains to be seen.
Well, speaking of riding high and getting a lot of media attention, Governor Roy Cooper, he has been presiding over the state updates on the statewide shutdown order and also the pandemic and how it's going. Several different polls showing him doing really, really well amongst Democrats, his own party, but Republicans and independents as well. He is well over 50%. Is this race for governor, which he's running against Dan Forrest on the Republican side, is the race really Roy Cooper's to lose now?
It's going to be very difficult for Dan Forrest to break through unless something unfortunately catastrophic happens. And that's the situation that you often find yourself in if you're a challenger going against a governor who's dealing with a crisis and whose management is getting fairly high marks. Now, Lieutenant Governor Forrest's constituency are largely comprised of the sorts of people who would tend to oppose a lot of the shutdown orders and the like, or would tend to say that they go too far, they need to be relaxed. But it turns out that so far people tend to be favoring at least the concept of continuing to do a very gradual reopening. Part of that has to do with the fact that Washington has decided to have our grandchildren provide all of the money to keep people afloat as much as possible. But you never can tell what would happen. Let's say if at Labor Day, if North Carolina, for instance, is several weeks behind its neighboring states in reopening the economy. The neighboring states are doing pretty well. North Carolina is still stuck in neutral. That could be an issue that Lieutenant Governor Forrest runs on. But one of the problems he has is people in his own party aren't necessarily helping him out, and that Senator Tom Tillis, who's running for re-election, is basically backing Governor Cooper. And so it makes it even a bigger challenge. Besides that was Dan Forrest's big strength, was grassroots support, going to every county in his bus and meeting lots of people, right. And he can't do that right now.
Rick, to your point about things happening around the state, the members of the General Assembly, right now everybody is really trying to be bipartisan in terms of supporting the governor because we're all in this together. It's a public health issue and all that. But you're starting to see cracks and disagreements, not only amongst members of the General Assembly, but local officials.
Right.
But when it comes to running those races for all 170 seats in the General Assembly, do you think that the pandemic is going to become an issue in terms of, well, maybe some sections, counties, regions of the state weren't as hardly hit, and therefore they feel like they were unduly bearing the economic burden of the shutdown? You anticipate any of that going on?
There may be some of that happens. There will be some areas of the state that are going to say, we weren't singled out. Everybody was treated with a one-size-fits-all shutdown, and guess what? We were doing okay. Or we had the opportunity to reopen our economy and start doing better, and we were denied that. And so that could well be a theme of the campaign in the fall. I also should mention, though, that the General Assembly is in session as we're taping this segment. They are likely to come back again mid to late May. They may come back again in the summer. And so they are not allowed to do a lot of fundraising while they're in session. And if it turns out that they are in a lengthy session, and I would guess that any session that they do starting in July, when they really have an idea of how much money that they have coming in, those may be long sessions. And so it's quite possible that the traditional campaign may not kick off until very, very late in the season. And so the normal time when people would be doing fundraisers and doing events and things like that, that's going to be pretty much closed off to them.
It's kind of interesting about the fiscal issues that we're facing because on the one hand, it seems like Republicans in general running for the General Assembly would be able to make the argument, hey, we have been good fiscal stewards and therefore we have a rainy day fund and now it's proven that we were right to put away money because now we can help people. On the other hand, Democrats who in general want a bigger, more robust government presence would be able to say, look, time of crisis, it's government that came through for you.
Well, Democrats are making that argument because they're continuing to argue for Medicaid expansion. And this is one of the arguments that the Republicans have zero interest in, largely for principled reasons, but also now they have a very major fiscal argument to make about this, is that Medicaid rolls are going to grow because people are losing health insurance because they're losing their jobs. And so if their private insurance company is no longer covering them, then they're going to go on to Medicaid. But to include Medicaid expansion and to add a whole new population of folks who would not have qualified anyway, then that's going to cause further drains on state coffers, and the state government has to provide a fairly high percentage of that money. So in this way, Medicaid expansion is going to be used as a campaign issue, but it's not really going to be much of a policy issue, I think, this year.
Health insurance likely to be an issue in the presidential race as well. We know North Carolina is a battleground. Is this a Trump state, or is this a presumably Joe Biden state?
Again, hard to say. I think it's probably going to be a very close state once again, and and part of this has to do with the fact that the president's base seems to be very, very solidly behind him and remain that way. And you saw that during some of the recent protests at the state capitol. You saw an awful lot of Trump support out there. Vice President Biden is going to get probably lots and lots of endorsements from the African-American community, from some traditional Democratic stronghold groups. And so then it's going to be a battle, as they say, a battle for the suburbs.
Exactly.
That's right. And turnout's going to be the key, as it always is.